Takk for det. Noe av det vakreste vi har skapt som forbund Arthur Svenssons internasjonale pris for faglige rettigheter. Det at vi gjorde det viser at vi et internasjonalt orientert forbund og et internasjonalt solidarisk forbund. For 2,5 år siden så gikk Arthur Svensson-prisen til den uavhengige fagbevegelsen i Belarus, BKDP og medlemsforbundet deres. De fikk prisen den gangen for sin uredde kamp for demokrati og grunnleggende faglige rettigheter i det som ofte kalles for Europas siste diktatur. I tillegg så fikk vi i Industri og Energi et særlig nært forhold til forbundet BNP, som organiserte de ansatte i det store gruveselskapet Belarus, der norske Yara var største kunde. Belarus, eller Hviterussland som mange kjenner landet som, har i mange år vært regnet som et av de verste landene i verden når det gjelder brudd på arbeidstakerrettigheter. Landet har vært preget av forsvinninger, politivold, manglende ytringsfrihet og manglende organisasjonsfrihet. Landet har en myndighetskontrollert fagbevegelse, der presidenten Lukasjenko utnevner lederen. Men de har også i flere år hatt en uavhengig fagbevegelse som aldri har gitt opp, tross Lukasjenko-regimets forsøk på å gjøre det vanskelig å rekruttere medlemmer, organisere folk og å drive vanlig fagforeningsaktivitet. Etter det forfalskede presidentvalget høsten 2020 ble situasjonen i Belarus forverret. All form for politisk opposisjon ble slått hardt ned på gjennom stor politibrutalitet, fengslinger og trakassering. Den uavhengige fagbevegelsen var helt sentral i kampen mot forfalskningen av valgresultatet og kampen for demokrati. Det oppstod en bølge av streiker, aksjoner, demonstrasjoner med krav om annullering av valgresultatet og at alle politiske fanger skulle løslates. Streikene og demonstrasjonene ble møtt med terror, massearrestasjoner og tortur. En rekke faglige tillitsvalgte og aktivister ble sparket fra jobben, og mange ble fengslet eller måtte rømme landet. Fagforeningskontorer ble raidet og stengt. BKDP ble ikke mer populær hos presidenten, som alliert med Putins Russland, da de gikk ut mot den russiske invasjonen i Ukraina og krevde at alle russiske tropper skulle ut av Belarus. Det toppet seg i april i fjor, da hele ledelsen i BKDP og medlemsforbundene ble arrestert, og litt senere da den uavhengige fagbevegelsen ble forbudt og kalt for ekstremister. Rundt 50 fagforeningsledere sitter nå i fengsel eller i straffekolonier med straffer på mange år, uten å få besøk og under elendige soningsforhold. Noen fagforeningsledere og aktivister har klart å rømme landet og har dannet en organisasjon som de kaller Solidarnost, med base i Bremen. En av disse aktivistene Liza Merliak, som står ved siden av meg, som tidligere internasjonal sekretær i vårt søsterforbund BNP. Og jeg ber dere ta godt imot henne.
Thank you. Dear brothers and sisters, let me introduce myself again. I normally say that I'm Liza Merliak, a Belarusian unionist and an extremist, and a politically displaced Belarusian. And there are very many of us Belarusians who fall under this category. Those who cannot enjoy the freedom of association in their own country, those who cannot go back home freely without fear of being put to prison. Let me tell you about my country. For almost 3 decades, Belarus has been a world champion in violating fundamental human rights, including the rights of workers for freedom of association. Belarus is mentioned among 10 worst countries for workers. During the mass uprising of Belarusians against Lukashenko and his regime in 2020, workers challenged the dictatorship with the threat of a general strike. The regime deployed outstanding repressions against the civil society, against the workers, against the unions. What more, Lukashenko dragged Belarus in the war, backing another dictator, Putin, against the people of Ukraine. And it was the Democratic Organization of Workers, the Belarusian Congress of Democratic Trade Unions, who voiced the firm anti-war position of the Belarusian workers. The consequences were massive arrests and criminal accusations for trade union and workers' leaders in April last year. Moreover, Belarus became a country without trade unions since July 2022, when all democratic trade unions were liquidated. We see that the dictatorship in Belarus does not stop repression against the civil society, and any activity in the country is labeled as extremism and terrorism. At the moment, 47 comrades of ours are in prisons and penal colonies in Belarus, convicted of high treason, defamation of the state, participating and supporting extremist activities with terms of up to 15 years in prison. Among them are well-known trade union figures, such as Alexander Yarashuk, the president of the Belarusian Congress of Democratic Trade Unions, who is also vice president of the International Trade Union Confederation and a member of the governing body of the International Labour Organization. Among the imprisoned are women trade unionists and elderly people, and many of them are labeled extremists. Some are labeled terrorists. We hear that the robes of political prisoners, whose number has reached 1,500 in the country, are also labeled, sadly with yellow labels. Political prisoners constantly undergo torture, severe punishment with close confinement in freezing cells. Forced labor of political prisoners is used without any trace of occupational health and safety, often in wood and textile industry. It is widely used in penal colonies to convert the prisoners into law-obedient citizens, the state says. There are also good news from Belarus. There are political prisoners who are released. Among them are my comrades Irina Budgusaim, Yanina Malash, Yevgen Govar, Leonid Sudalenko, Igor Povarov, and recently a friend of mine, Sergei Antusevich, who is vice chairperson of Belarusian Congress of Democratic Trade Unions, had been released. However, there are very bad news, like the worsening, the confinement conditions for Alexander Yarashuk, the president of Belarusian Congress of Democratic Trade Unions, is worsened. He was transferred from a penal colony to a closed prison. There is prolongation of terms in jail, like for my sister, Polina Sharenta-Panasiuk. There are worsening conditions for older prisoners with health issues, like leaders of the Radio Electronic Workers Union, Vasil Beresnev. There are new arrests and new political prisoners, like activists from Naftan, which is an oil refinery, state oil refinery, activists, organizers, and leaders of this company, of my union at that company, Volga Britikova, Alexander Balonkin, Alexander Kukharonak are in jail. There are repeated mass arrests of workers at this oil refinery and other enterprises. One of the good news is also that a very important part of our trade union network, Alla Tsverko, she was under threat of deportation from Sweden that denied her political asylum. Now she is with us. She's in Poland after she has been assisted by NSZZ Solidarność, a very big, important trade union in Poland, and the Polish Foreign Ministry. In nowadays Belarus, workers who had been in our ranks, in the ranks of the Independent Trade Union of Miners and Chemical Workers, are being laid off. Their contracts are not renewed. Recently, there were noticeably many arrests at workplaces, when the police would handcuff workers and take them away from the workplaces. Of course, in such circumstances, the remaining activists of our union cannot act freely under the threat of being prosecuted. The regime has gone so far in its fight against the freedom of association that this year's International Labour Conference in June 2023 has voted for a resolution to apply Article 33 of the International Labour Organization Constitution to make the government of Belarus return to respect the international labour standards. As I mentioned, many trade unionists had to flee from the dictatorial regime, and we are continuing our work in exile. Thus, in exile in the free city of Bremen, in Germany, we founded an association and called it Solidarność, which is solidarity in Belarusian, to support trade unionists that were arrested and convicted by Lukashenko regime. We are campaigning to release our comrades from jail. We spread the news from Belarus, collect donations to our Solidarity Fund to help the families, children of our comrades, and I use this opportunity to thank Industrie Energie for its donation and to the LO for its donation that we used to provide direct humanitarian aid to the families and children of trade unionists who are in jail. It is a big challenge for the global workers' movement to act together with the employers, with the respective governments, to put up pressure on the regime in Belarus. And the release of all political prisoners should be the precondition of any dialogue with Lukashenko. I would like to round up with sharing my belief that freedom is not something once gained and then staying forever. We need to constantly fight for it. The same goes with freedom of association. I'm sure that the Workers' International stay united in our fight for the freedom of association globally. I would like to quote a wise trade unionist, Dan Galin, who once said, "Our history teaches us that dictatorship never lasts, however strong they may seem for a time, whereas workers will never cease to organize democratic trade unions in their permanent struggle for freedom and for justice for themselves and for society. I wish you a big success at shop floor level, organizing for democracy at workplace, comrades. Solidarity forever." Thank you.